confidence? Well, today, we're going to unpack that mystery. First off, let's talk about attachment. Narcissism is a complex personality trait with roots that extend deep into one's upbringing and experiences. There's no one-size-fits-all explanation for narcissism, as it can manifest in various forms depending on one's childhood environment. But here's the thing. Regardless of the path that leads to narcissism, attachment issues tend to play a significant role. Whether it's a chaotic and neglectful upbringing or an overly indulgent and entitled childhood, attachment problems often lay the groundwork for narcissistic behaviors and subsequently abandonment issues. So join us as we dissect the psychology behind narcissistic abandonment fears and shed light on the intricate interplay between attachment styles and narcissistic traits. It's a journey into the depths of the human psyche, and you won't want to miss it. Narcissistic folks usually have a lot of anxiety about attachment. They struggle with separations and often feel angry or upset when they're away from someone important to them. It's like they're mad that they were left in the first place. For them, breakups and separations feel like deep wounds that are hard to heal from. Another reason why abandonment hits them hard is their need for control. They're okay with ending a relationship when they want, but they don't handle it well when someone else leaves them. It's like their way of protecting themselves from feeling vulnerable. Plus, they're really concerned about how things look to others. They might do sketchy stuff behind closed doors, but freak out if it makes them look bad in public. They'll mistreat their partner in private, then act all offended if the partner tries to leave them, because it messes up their image. All of this ties back to their lack of self-awareness and their fear of being vulnerable. They struggle to address their own issues and understand how their past experiences affect them. It's like they're terrified of facing their own flaws and insecurities, so they lash out at anyone who tries to bring it up. Basically, narcissism in relationships is like dealing with a bunch of different personalities at once. There's a scared kid inside them who just wants attention, the one-up hero who needs to be in charge all the time, the image-conscious side that cares about appearances, and the complete lack of self-reflection. It's a messy mix that makes relationships with narcissists really complicated. It's not just romantic breakups that trigger a big reaction from narcissistic folks. It's any kind of ending. Whether it's leaving a job, cutting off a friendship, or even just distancing yourself from them, they tend to flip out. We kind of agree to put up with their nonsense and never leave, so when someone does, they lose it. You've probably seen it. The crazy harassment, the stalking, the refusal to let go after a breakup. It's all because they're terrified of being abandoned, so they go into overdrive trying to keep you around. And then there's the passive-aggressive stuff, like trash-talking you on social media or spreading rumors about you. It's like they can't handle rejection, so they try to make you look bad instead. When you finally decide to cut ties with them, you think it'll be tough, but you're probably not prepared for how tough it actually is. Especially if you struggle with attachment issues yourself, it can feel impossible to break free. But don't be fooled by their tough exterior. Underneath it all, they're just as scared of being abandoned as you are. Now let's talk about their grandiosity. They love to talk a big game, whether it's about writing a screenplay or starting a new business. They'll go on and on about their big plans, but actually following through, that's a different story. It takes a ton of hard work and dedication to turn those dreams into reality, and that's something they often struggle with. They're all talk and no action, getting logos made before they've even taken the first step. The trouble with many narcissistic people is that they think success should just come to them without much effort. When things don't go their way, they feel entitled and blame the world for not handing them the success they think they deserve. They're like, "I'm awesome. Why do I have to work so hard?" And when things don't pan out, they play the victim card, blaming others and making excuses, like saying they have ADHD, even if they've never been diagnosed. They also love to shift the blame onto anyone but themselves. It's always their parents' fault, or their teachers, or the lack of mentors. But instead of actually seeking guidance, they sit around waiting for someone to come and rescue them with words of wisdom. They're quick to point fingers, but slow to take responsibility for their own lives. If they put as much effort into working as they do into blaming others, they might actually get somewhere. Narcissistic folks can also be real perfectionists. They set impossibly high standards for themselves, thinking that if everything's perfect, then they're perfect. But the problem with perfectionism is that it often leads to paralysis. They get so caught up in the tiny details that nothing ever gets done. Narcissistic folks are all about the end game, the big success, the flashy stuff that makes them look good. They don't care much for the journey it takes to get there. You'll hear them boasting about their future IPO, the mansion they'll buy, the fancy vacations they'll take, and all the power they'll have. But ask them about the nitty-gritty work it takes to achieve those goals, and you'll likely draw a blank stare. They all talk about the big picture, but often lack the drive to put in the daily grind needed to make it happen. They'll yap about franchising a business they haven't even started, or planning their graduation party before they've even applied to school. At first, it might be amusing to hear their grandiose plans, but after a while, it just feels like you're watching a cartoon fantasy that'll never come true. And if you're footing the bill for their pipe dreams, it can get really old really fast. But it gets even messier if you're financially supporting this dreamer. Whether it's your narcissistic adult child, partner, or coworker, you might find yourself dealing with their constant excuses and blame shifting when they fail to launch. They'll gripe about how unfair life is, how nobody believes in them, and how the world's against them, all while you're there supporting them every step of the way. You could pour in thousands of dollars and endless hours trying to help them get on their feet, only to find them still mooching off you and pointing fingers at you for their failures. Narcissistic folks can't stand the idea of not being seen as successful. When they haven't achieved what they think they should, it hits them hard. They're constantly comparing themselves to others, especially on social media, and if they see someone doing better, it stirs up even more shame. And guess who gets caught in the crossfire? Yep, the ones closest to them, family and partners. Imagine pouring all your support and love into someone, only for them to turn around and blame you for their lack of success. It's heartbreaking. Some parents especially fall into this trap. They might feel guilty about their child not making it, so they keep enabling them, hoping their support will finally push them to succeed. But it usually backfires. The narcissistic person ends up feeling more like a victim, and they stay stuck in that cycle of blame and resentment. Their inflated expectations of instant success also trip them up. They're always comparing themselves to the cream of the crop, the trust fund kids, the ones with connections, the ones who seem destined for greatness. But they forget that most of us don't have those luxuries. We're just trying to make ends meet and keep the lights on. But for a narcissistic person, being ordinary is like their worst nightmare. They'd rather cling to their grandiose dreams than face the reality of hard work and patience. Dealing with a narcissistic partner who just can't seem to get their act together. You're not alone. This failure to launch scenario is pretty common in these relationships. But what can you really do about it? It's like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. You're stuck. Continuously giving in to their demands only fuels the problem. You don't have to be mean about it, but enabling them won't fix anything. After a while, it's like throwing money into a black hole. We're all responsible for our own paths in life, but narcissists struggle to see beyond their own grandiose ideas. Imagine you're in a relationship with someone like this, and you're trying to build a life together. It's frustrating to see them constantly chasing after big dreams without putting in the work. And if you have kids, it's even harder. You might wonder if they realize the impact it's having on the family, but the truth is, they're so wrapped up in their own world that they can't see the bigger picture. And let's talk about finances. If you're the one bringing in most of the money and doing all the household chores, it can be exhausting, physically, emotionally, and financially. You keep giving advice, but they never listen. It's like talking to a brick wall. It's draining, to say the least. Narcissists thrive on control, so they often impose strict routines on everyone else. They dictate when and how things should be done. And because they usually control the finances, it's their way or the highway. It's like living in a dictatorship, but instead of a country, it's your own home. It's pretty wild to see how rigid and obsessive some narcissists can be. They're like clean freaks on steroids, keeping everything spotless and germ-free. But here's the kicker. They're not just neat freaks. They take it to a whole other level. For example, they might go off the deep end if someone even thinks about lighting up a cigarette in their presence. It's not just a polite request to smoke outside. It's a full-blown attack on the person's character. And don't even get them started on sugar. No one dares to touch the sweet stuff in their house without facing their wrath. Their homes are like military bases, with everything in its proper place and cleaned to perfection multiple times a day. It's like they're trying to scrub away their own inner chaos by obsessing over external order. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with liking a clean space or wanting things organized. But when it becomes an obsession, that's when things get weird. They flip out over the smallest mess or disruption to their routine, turning their need for order into a weapon to control others. Even activities like meditation and yoga, which are supposed to bring peace and harmony, become tools of manipulation in their hands. It's like they have a knack for turning something harmless into something harmful. It's like magic, but in the worst possible way. Living with a narcissist can feel like you're trapped in a never-ending loop of their obsessive rituals. It's like trying to keep up with a baby's nap schedule, but instead of sleep, it's all about cleanliness and order. The thing is, narcissists often use this rigid routine as a shield against their own deep-seated insecurities. They might not even realize they're doing it. It's kind of like how trauma survivors might cling to control as a way to cope with their past. But here's where it gets tricky. If you dare to disrupt their carefully curated world, they'll come at you with all the fury of a bull seeing red. This need for control can spill over into the workplace too, making tasks take forever because they're too busy fussing over the tiniest details. Growing up in this environment is no picnic either. Childhood becomes a minefield of walking on eggshells, with no room for the messy chaos that comes with being a kid. Narcissistic parents see their children more like trophies than actual humans, and once those kids start to assert themselves, all bets are off. Being in a relationship with a narcissist can feel like being stuck with a needy infant sometimes. Everything has to be just right, on their terms, their schedule, their way. And you probably notice these patterns right from the start. Their need for perfection in meals, their strict routines, their stinginess with space. If you move in together, don't expect things to change. In fact, you might find yourself bending over backwards just to keep up with their demands for order. Narcissists see people as objects, plain and simple. If you don't fit neatly into their schedule, they'll treat you like any other inconvenience. Imagine being a coffee maker asked to watch Netflix. It just doesn't compute for them. Then there's another type of personality, the obsessive-compulsive type. This isn't the same as obsessive-compulsive disorder, which is more about anxiety and rituals. Obsessive-compulsive personality is all about rules, order, and workaholism. These folks prioritize tasks over relationships and won't budge an inch when it comes to their rigid routines. When you mix this with narcissism, you get a whole new level of control freakery, a recipe for some seriously uncomfortable dynamics. If you've ever been trapped in a relationship like this, I want to hear your story, especially if you've been through a divorce where your ex was more concerned about what they're entitled to than about your well-being. Sound familiar? Yeah, you're not alone. They're scary organized, aren't they? Everything has to be just so, from their color-coded cabinets to their rigid schedules. But when order comes before kindness and empathy, something's off. Another telltale sign. Money. They're super uptight about it. Remember, the devil wears Prada. That boss was a textbook example. Obsessed with details, cruel to anyone who dared disrupt their meticulously planned day. If that rings a bell, I'm here for you. Living with that level of control is suffocating. You could do everything right, but it's never enough. And forget about making any demands of your own. They'll always find a way to make it your fault. Crazy, right? But that's life with a narcissist for you. I often get asked a particular question. Do narcissists really know they're difficult to deal with? And more importantly, do they realize how insecure they are? Well, here's the scoop. They're not clueless. Deep down, they see the fallout from their behavior, but their entitlement and impulsiveness stop them from hitting the brakes. It's like they're bursting the seams if they don't let their nonsense out. They'll justify their actions, defend them, explain away any criticism. But in a tiny corner of their minds, they know they're not exactly winning any awards for good behavior. Sometimes in therapy, if they're in therapy, they might even admit they can't help themselves. They just need to let it all out, even if it sounds silly. They can't quite bring themselves to admit what's really going on. Then there's a turning point in every narcissistic relationship. It's when they realize you're onto them. You're not taking their bait as much, not falling for their mind games. You're standing a little taller, not beating yourself up, not getting as anxious when they threaten to bail. At this stage, things often get worse. They ramp up the nastiness, trying to provoke a reaction. They insult your friends, your family, hit all your sore spots. It's like a toxic roller coaster, with their rage spiraling out of control. They need you to react, to lose your cool, so they can feel superior. And when you don't, they'll turn up the heat, just to see if they can break you. But don't give in. Keep standing tall, and know that you're not alone in this ride. If you manage to hold your ground and not buckle under the pressure, the narcissist will eventually lose steam. Sometimes they'll just get bored and move on. But getting to that point isn't easy. Along the way, you'll face abuse, anger, and their relentless rage. And just when you think it can't get any worse, they somehow sense that you're onto them. Despite their lack of empathy, narcissists are incredibly tuned into their surroundings, but only from their own self-centered perspective. They're always on the lookout for threats, always seeking validation for their greatness. They pick up on shifts in behavior, noticing when people start to see through their facade. There comes a moment for every narcissist where they realize they've gone too far, where they've pushed someone to their breaking point, and that person shuts down. This realization can hit them hard, especially if it happens in a professional setting where they're not used to being challenged. But now they're stuck in a bind. They know deep down that something's not right with their behavior, but they can't quite admit it to themselves. And if you're in a relationship with them, you might find yourself gradually becoming indifferent to their antics. Once you understand the patterns of narcissism, it's like having a roadmap to navigate their behavior. That's why I started this channel, to help you recognize those patterns and break free from the cycle of trauma bonding. As you start to distance yourself emotionally, they may cycle through a range of behaviors, from rage to attempts to show they're actually a decent person. But don't be fooled. It's just another tactic to try and regain control. In a narcissistic relationship, it's all about control. They want to control how the relationship looks to the world, control you, control the story, and control their ego boost. It's control on steroids. And once you start to figure out what's going on, they'll ramp up the control even more. They won't let you rock their boat because they want to control the story. Once they sense that you're onto them and they start losing control, they'll unleash even more rage. There's just no escaping it. You might be wondering, can I figure this out without setting off a rage bomb every time? Probably not. You'll either get fed up and bail, or if you're stuck, you'll turn the relationship into a robotic routine, hoping they'll leave or find somewhere else to blow off steam, because you're done listening to their tantrums. Eventually, your mere presence will trigger so much shame that they'll either try to crush you with their anger or bolt because they can't handle the shame. Neither outcome is pleasant, especially if you're not ready to call it quits. And here's the twist. Even if you manage to understand what's going on without them catching on, they'll still pick up on your subtle shifts. It's infuriating because they never noticed when you needed them. But now they're all over your slightest change in behavior. Understanding narcissism is like unlocking a door to freedom, but it can also make your life pretty miserable for a while. They'll label you as cold, weird, or socially inept just because you've got their number. So, while it's a victory in the long run, brace yourself for a bumpy ride in the short term. You've cracked the code on narcissism, and that's a game changer. No more falling for their mind games or manipulation. It's like stepping into the light after being in the dark for so long. You see through it all now, and that sense of clarity brings a strange sense of peace. But here's the thing. When they realize they're losing their grip on you, they won't take it lightly. That frustration turns into rage, but you're not alone in this anymore. Understanding what's happening helps you break free from self-blame and realize it's not your fault. Sure, the relationship might lose its luster, but it's a small price to pay for freedom from constant invalidation and confusion. So keep pushing forward. You're on the path to reclaiming your power. If you found this insight helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. And remember, if you need further support on your journey, check out the free book and one-on-one consultations linked in the description below. You've got this.